Hello and welcome to 5 Secrets to Unlocking Mobile Marketing SEO Success.
So with me today is Brian Klais, the founder and CEO of Pure Oxygen. So Brian, thank you very much for attending today's discussion with us.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
So for anybody and everybody throughout the conversation, if you have any comments, suggestions, or see any really insightful insights that come out of the webinar, please go ahead and share them with your networks, either at the anchor tag Brian Klais or at Mobile Direct. You can also use the hashtag mobile search. And then in addition to that, go ahead and ask us questions through the control panel. So you can just go ahead and type in your question, and we'll answer those near the end of the session today. And with that in mind, I'd like to just jump right in without any further ado and hand it off to Brian so that he can talk to us about what's going on in SEO and how it's critically important for us to understand the latest and greatest elements of search engine optimization and what that really means in today's digital age. And so with Brian, let's let you take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. Just to get started, I've spent the last 12, 13 years in the search engine optimization space, and it's very difficult to remember a time that's been filled with more turbulence and change than the last 12 months. What we've seen over the last 12 months, particularly from Google, has really redefined or has begun to redefine what does search engine optimization even mean to us going forward. It raises lots of new challenges, questions, risks, and opportunities. And today we'd like to take a look at what are some of those keys to successfully optimizing for the mobile consumer experience. Before we get into that, I'd like to take just a brief minute to look back at just a few of the major changes that we saw over the last 12 months from Google. Because I think what we start to see is this picture of what's really driving these changes from Google. And I think the answer to that is very clear. It's mobile. Let me click forward here. So you see on the screen just a few representative snapshots, really, of major changes that Google unleashed over the last 12, 13, 14 months. Let's just look at some of these very briefly. And we'll go through these just kind of clockwise. So in the upper left, we see sort of a nod to the disappearance, really, of our keyword data, our keyword referral data. That was a major, major change that happened that's made it much more difficult to practice search engine optimization when you're just focused on keywords and keyword traffic and keyword rankings. What's behind that change? It's really about, although this is a very contentious issue, it's been heavily debated, but in my view, it really is about protecting the privacy and protecting personally identifiable information from mobile users who would be searching Google and could potentially be sharing that information unknowingly to your weblogs in the form of hashed search query history, geo-encoded information, potentially social credentials that normally sort of flow through the URL string in the referral link process. So that move was significant, and it really does protect Google from sort of liability around sharing of that kind of information accidentally with webmasters. And so that was a very big change, again, motivated by mobile. And then if we just sort of take the next step here and look at Hummingbird, the launch of Hummingbird as a general algorithm update that occurred last year is really Google's sort of reflects Google's ability to better understand natural language queries, potentially queries that are spoken into your device, and enables Google to really understand the theme of a web page and really provide an answer to questions like how many calories are in a slice of pizza, giving you the answer to that question instead of just 10 blue links to click on. This is, in my view, a superior alternative even to Apple's Siri user experience. And so again, here you have another major change that's affecting SEO strategies that's really animated by Google wanting to provide a better mobile consumer experience. You also see it now in the bottom right-hand corner when you look at Google Maps, the application that is one of the, if not the most popular smartphone applications. And you see Google's about a year ago at their I/O event, you've heard Google announcing the integration of new social signals into things like Google Maps, so that what you're seeing when you do your search on your Google Maps app might be different than what others see in terms of the locations that show up in response to a query that you might conduct within the Maps app. You can even see hints from Google that what's coming in the near future is a stronger tie-in of social signals. Namely, if you do a search for, let's say, a pizza restaurant or an Italian restaurant near you, you might see restaurants highlighted with the little pin inside of the Maps app that have more reviews or more positive reviews that have been entered by friends of yours or friends of their friends than you would see normally without that sort of social validation layer. So you're seeing major change in terms of the integration of social and local search, and then this bottom left picture is just sort of capturing the global trend that we saw last year with Google integrating Google Plus and social signals into not just the Maps app, but into all of their products. YouTube, even Google's search results themselves now have Google Plus social signals baked in, so that minimally, if the friends of your followers on Google Plus might be seeing in their search results links and information that you've shared or that your followers have shared with their followers. So you're seeing a lot of these changes, all of which really sort of highlight how important it is in Google's mission to provide a great mobile consumer experience. And so it's not surprising that what Google also must do to provide a great mobile consumer experience is to optimize mobile search results. Last June, Google announced that there would soon be an algorithm update that would start to reward or penalize websites that followed Google's recommendations and requirements that they've published in terms of how to structure your mobile site, how to structure your responsive design site. And that algorithm change actually took effect in September, October timeframe last year. Myself, my team at Pure Oxygen, and others in the SEO industry have long been talking about mobile SEO and how important it is and how brands need to get ready. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And it finally did arrive then last fall. We looked at that as an opportunity to do a little bit of research and start to quantify how well are the leading brands in America prepared for this new paradigm, this shift to mobile search optimization and compliance with Google's best practices they're recommending. We studied the Fortune 100 and quantified what type of mobile presence do they have? Do they have a responsive design site? Do they have any mobile presence? Do they have a dedicated mobile site? And then we looked at each of those mobile configurations against Google's published best practices, their published recommendations, to see what kind of risk is there for these brands. We then summarized that to say that there's quite a lot of brand risk, meaning in our study, almost half of the Fortune 100 had no mobile presence whatsoever. When you requested their homepage from your iPhone or your Android device, the page was the same experience that you would get on your desktop. About 45% of the Fortune 100 had dedicated mobile sites. Those you're sure familiar with the m.domain.com sort of experience, and about 11% had a responsively designed website. And so what we summarize in this report is what type of ranking risk exists around brand queries, what kind of ranking risks are there around non-brand or long-tail queries that are conducted on mobile devices. And so if you'd like to get a copy of this report, we'd be happy to send you one. Simply email us at the address below. But the bottom line was that over 90% of the Fortune 100, in our view, was not, at this time, this was June of 2013, was not prepared for complying with Google's requirements. So there's a very big opportunity. So with all of that said, what are the secrets? What are the keys to complying with Google's requirements, meeting Google's best practices, but not just what Google has, published or recommends today, but how do you future-proof your mobile presence for what's to come? So the first tip, the first secret that we're going to talk about today is sort of multifaceted. It's about delivering relevant mobile content. And when I say multifaceted, what I mean is it's firstly about having mobile content, and it's secondly about making sure that what you're serving or delivering to users is actually relevant to their query at that moment in time. So let's dig in. So there are really three configurations of mobile formatting that Google supports. There's responsive design, there's dedicated mobile sites, and there's what's called dynamic serving. So just a quick word about some of these. With responsive design, your site is all living at one URL. The mobile experience is simply style sheet changes that reformat the presentation layer of the content that lives at a given URL. With dedicated mobile sites, it's different. You have generally a stripped down, slimmed down version of what's on the desktop URLs, living at something like m.walmart.com or something like that. And with dynamic serving, dynamic serving is sort of a misunderstood amalgamation of the two, in that with dynamic serving, you are doing a combination of both letting your server detect when the device is a mobile device, and then in response to that, you're serving content at that same desktop URL that appears to be formatted for mobile devices. And so there are lots of use cases where that is actually the preferred configuration, particularly in retail and large media sites. Now, one of the points to make here is that Google supports all three of these methods. None of them are inherently better than others in terms of ranking potential. You hear it said a lot that, well, if you deploy a responsive design site, you'll rank better. Well, there's a nuance to that. You might rank better if you currently have no mobile formatting or no mobile content, but that doesn't mean that responsive design sites actually rank better than, let's say, a dedicated mobile site by definition. That's not true. So each of these methods has trade-offs, and that's one of the important things to consider in choosing how you're going to go to market from a mobile formatting perspective. For instance, if you've got dedicated mobile sites that use the m.dot or mobile.dot configuration, subdomain configuration, you have to do a lot of sort of back-end plumbing to tag the pages correctly, to tag the www version and the m.dot version, and to tag the mobile redirects that live on the server, so that Google can then connect the dots and go, oh, I get it. These pages are all sort of derivatives of one another. That makes sense. Now I know what to serve up to mobile searchers. Cool. So there's a bit of work required if you're using dedicated mobile sites. There's also a bit of work required if you're using responsive design sites, because often responsive sites, while they do provide a more efficient way of managing the code and less maintenance from the perspective of not having to manage two separate websites, the trade-off is that you're still forcing the end user to download the entire desktop page. All of the requests to assemble that page have to still be made. All of the CSS, all of the JavaScript, all of the images all still have to load in order to render that page on the user's device, which makes it a very slow experience many times. So there are some issues that you need to optimize for in that case in order to meet Google's requirements that your pages load in under 1 second. And then lastly, if you're using a dynamic serving configuration, that requires often your most expensive developers and IT resources to achieve that kind of fluid dynamic serving through your code base. rather than through style sheets and those types of things. So the workload tends to be fairly expensive because it requires senior developers to deploy, manage, maintain the code that achieves that dynamic serving. So there's trade-offs with each. Neither is inherently better than another in terms of what's going to help you rank better. So that's just a few sort of things to understand about making that decision. So
by the way, just to interject on that one really quick, I think a good comment for people to understand too is accessible for mobile does not mean designed for mobile. So just because someone can get a site, and even if it's responsive and they can access it, doesn't mean that they've actually designed it properly for a good user experience as well. Would you agree with that?
That is an excellent point. We'll talk a little bit more here later in terms of how a lot of companies sort of approach responsive design almost in a retrofit fashion, like they take their current desktop site and slap on some style sheets that achieve the formatting that sort of allows them to check a box and says, yes, we have a responsively designed site. But then you still sort of run into this trap where it's not actually designed for mobile. It's not designed in a mobile-first fashion, and so you still have these. I mean, one of the trademarks of that is you have really long load times, or 3-4 second load times, and 3-4 megabyte pages that are downloaded on the mobile device. So yeah, I completely agree with that, and it's you need to really think about what's your responsive design strategy and how is it actually mobile first. So let's look a little bit more here at what does it take to deliver relevant mobile content. Google has some very specific guidelines, and some of these comments are really aimed at the brands that have dedicated mobile sites, since that is the predominant, at least at this point in time, that is the predominant method that brands use to have a mobile site. So when you have an subdomain for housing your mobile content, Google has some very specific requirements for how do you configure that. One of the common issues that Google has seen over time, and any of us who have been studying mobile SEO and sort of in the trenches have seen the same phenomena that you see in this example on the right-hand side. So here's a search for a BMW car, and the search is being conducted from the mobile device. And you click that link because it looks like it's a pretty deep link. It's BMW, USA, and then it's 320IX, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, that's a deep link. That's going to get me right to the page I'm looking for. But you click it, and where do you go? You go to the home page of the BMW mobile site. And that's a very frustrating user experience because that's not what you clicked on. That's not what you wanted. So the issue here that Google has highlighted and has recommendations and requirements around is that if you have a mobile equivalent version of a desktop page that is currently indexed in Google, then you need to redirect that user who requests that desktop page over to the equivalent MDOT or mobile version of that page. If you don't have a mobile version of that page, then what you're supposed to do is just not redirect that user at all. They should just get the desktop version, which might sound a little counterintuitive, but that is Google's recommendation and requirement. And so you can kind of see how that experience works in the case of BMW. And here's an example from Amazon where they've done a nice job of really complying with Google's requirements, so that if in the center you see there's a search for I don't remember what term I'd used for that search. I think I just used Amazon. But you can see if you click the home page, or rather the first link that's highlighted from your iPhone or Android device, you get the mobile version of the Amazon homepage. That's cool. It's exactly what you're looking for as the mobile user, right? But if you click, let's say, the new releases button, there isn't a mobile version of that page. At least there wasn't at the time of the screenshot. And so Amazon correctly does not implement a mobile redirect. They don't try to force you to go back to their mobile homepage and re-navigate their whole site. They just serve up the desktop version of that page. So that is the correct implementation of Google's requirements on this note. Now, let's talk for a moment about the other piece to this secret, about understanding what is relevant to your mobile consumer. It's really important to research and understand how does your voice of customer, amongst mobile users differ from the voice of customer that's, let's say, a desktop user. There probably are differences, and you can use tools like AdWords. You can use even your own analytics in some cases. If you have an on-site search, internal search tool, you can mine that data to understand how do mobile users search differently, what types of words do they look for, what represents their use case, like why is it that they're hitting your site, what is it that they're looking for, and does that differ at all from how desktop users interact with you and your brand digitally. In some cases, that is really evident. As an example, I've got on the screen here of a Midwestern utility that understands this. When you have a moment of power outage in your house, your DSL is down, your Wi-Fi is down, you actually, if you're looking for information on the outage that has occurred in your area, your laptop or desktop PC is somewhat useless. It's really difficult to get that information, but obviously if you've got a mobile device, you would probably use it by default to do a search, like what's happening in Madison, Wisconsin, Madison power outage or something like that, or LA power outage. So this brand has gone to the lengths of understanding how does that really play out in reality, and they discovered that in moments of outage, the number of queries on Google for that community plus the word power outage was dramatically higher, and in fact the number of searches that happened from the mobile device exceeded the number of searches that happened from desktop devices. And so this was a sort of an aha moment for this brand, because they understood that, well, so if most of our users in that particular situation are using their device to search Google for Madison power outage information, we need to make sure that we have content there that addresses that outage and provides an update or communicates with that customer in an appropriate way. So it's just an example of understanding how mobile consumers interact differently with you, what kinds of terms do they use from their mobile device, and how can you make sure that you've got relevant content prepared so that when they do that query, you're ready and you're there and you've got presence and you've nailed it. So just sort of a last somewhat of a technical note here. How a lot of brands with mobile sites, dedicated mobile sites, tend to implement their mobile content is at the server level, they implement mobile redirects. And in particular, we'll tend to use pattern matching logic to execute these mobile redirects. So that, let's say you've got a, if I'm Bluefly and I've got addresses page, there might be a redirect, what's known as a conditional redirect on my server that says, oh, for any iPhone or Android or BlackBerry that hits our www.bluefly.com/dresses page, automatically redirect them to m.bluefly.com/dresses. So that's typically how this type of mobile page content gets integrated with the desktop content to provide a seamless user experience. But there are some caveats to how you implement that type of technical redirect, and we'll look at that in just a moment. And in fact, it does segue quite nicely into the second secret, or the second tip to mobile SEO success. One that is actually incredibly important in Google's eyes, because it really does determine the quality of that mobile searcher experience. And that is optimizing or fixing your mobile redirects. So just as a caveat, this section really also is aimed at brands who use dedicated mobile sites as opposed to, let's say, responsive design. So as I just mentioned, if you have mobile content living at a dedicated subdomain, then what Google recommends and requires, in fact, is that you disclose the redirects that you're using. So as I mentioned, what often happens is brands will have redirect code that lives on their server that is responsible for executing that sort of invisible link. Like when your iOS, your iPhone or Android device requests a desktop page, and your server then says, "Oh hey iPhone," or "Oh hey Android, here's the equivalent MDOT version of that content." That code all lives on the server, typically. And so what has to happen, Google says, is that you need to provide an extra header bit of information in your server's header response. I know that gets a little technical, but there's a header that you can set called the vary header, and it needs to contain the words user agent. That tells Google that you're not trying to cloak, or you're not trying to do a bait and switch with your site, where you're giving some users some content and then you're giving other users different content. That's a historically, an abused tactic. And so Google's very sensitive to sites that do that. So Google says, okay, you can do it in this case as long as you disclose it to us and we can see that you're being transparent about it. So here's an example of, we looked at Amazon a little earlier. And so here's, on the left is the Amazon homepage for desktop. On the right is Amazon's homepage for mobile. So we have some tools that we use that sort of expose the header information of a site in terms of how it responds to different mobile devices. And you can see in this example, I'm just taking a screenshot of our tool. It's called Mobile Redirect Viewer. You can see in this example that Amazon, when an iPhone device requests the Amazon homepage, what Amazon is doing is they're using what's known as a temporary redirect. Technically, it's a 302 status code. That's not particularly relevant here, but just to show that there is a redirect involved. And the destination of that redirect is listed here. And so this URL corresponds to the URL of their mobile homepage. Although ironically or interestingly enough, it doesn't use MDOT or mobile dot conventions, but that's neither here nor there. The important point is that the vary header, you can see it listed here. It's vary on the left, and then it says its values say accept encoding, which is sort of irrelevant to the mobile SEO issue at hand. I mean, in other words, it's fine that it says that, but it also says user agent as well in that header response. That's exactly how you should structure your mobile redirect, so that Google, when Google crawls this homepage, Google crawls, I should also point out, Google crawls the web using an iPhone user agent when they're trying to understand mobile content. They use their Google bot identifies itself using the iPhone user agent string in order to see what kind of content your server is serving up to iPhone users. And it's made that arbitrary decision that iPhone users are worth emulating in terms of trying to get and crawl that content. So, so in this case, when Google requests the homepage of Amazon as an iPhone user agent, they are seeing the appropriate information that this content that lives at that desktop homepage address varies by user agent. And therefore, Google now knows, okay, so I could, if I'm Google, I could serve up this mobile URL to a iPhone or Android searcher who's using Google and looking for Amazon. Google now knows that it could serve up that URL in the search results and that it represents a solid user experience. So that gets a little technical. So apologies for that, but it is a technical sort of discussion and a technical point that really, really matters a lot to Google. Now, another issue that tends to come up here is that because a lot of sites, as I mentioned earlier, sites or brands that use dedicated mobile sites tend to use sort of pattern matching logic to accomplish these types of server redirects. And sometimes that leads to unexpected consequences where there actually isn't a page that lives at that mobile address. Like in that example I mentioned a few minutes ago of Bluefly, like if m.bluefly.com/dresses doesn't actually exist, then when the mobile user or mobile searcher clicks that dresses page from Google, and they get automatically redirected by the server over to m.bluefly.com/dresses, and there's no content there, what do they get? They get an error page. They get a 404 page. And so Google has taken a really hard stance on this issue. In fact, Google has said that pages that do that will fall out of the index completely. So this is a really serious issue that I think flies under the radar for a lot of brands, because you kind of have to have some mechanism to check that, oh, that redirect actually does lead to a valid page or doesn't. It leads to an error page. So you need to check that information. Fortunately, Google Webmaster Tools recently launched some changes that help to disclose or report mobile errors that your server is serving up. So you can get that information for free from Google Webmaster Tools if you use that tool. There are also other tools, like some of the ones that I've mentioned. We provide a few tools as well that can help identify mobile redirect errors to catch them sort of before you have a problem or before those pages fall out of the index. Give me a second here. Just how significant of an issue is this? Well, when Google published some of these recommendations or rather when Google announced that they were now live with their smartphone algorithm in September, October of 2013, we decided to do a follow-up research project that looked at the top retailers, since most retailers utilize mobile site configurations. We wanted to understand how pervasive is this particular technical issue or set of issues. And what we found wasn't terribly surprising. That is that about 22% of the top 100 retailers that use mobile sites actually do have mobile redirect errors happening on their site right now and may not know about it. And in other words, those desktop pages that Google has indexed are at risk of potentially falling out of Google's search results altogether. That's a pretty serious issue that's affecting about 1 in 5 retail brands. Another related issue is something we talked about, which is irrelevant redirects. This is where, like that BMW example I mentioned, where let's say you're requesting a deep page on the site, you're expecting that you'll get the mobile version of that deep page. Instead, you end up on the mobile home page. About 2/3 of the top 100 retailers with mobile sites are guilty of that issue and need to address it. And then lastly, this other issue that we've talked about with disclosing the mobile redirects using the very header, almost 100% of the top brands that use dedicated mobile sites do not comply with this requirement in Google. Now, at this point in time, Google has not said, hey, look, if you don't have the very header, you're at risk of completely dropping out of the index. So this one does not have as much urgency, I think, associated with it at the moment. On the other hand, the fact that nearly all retailers that have mobile sites do not comply with it, I think, is a major source of risk. That if you do have a mobile site, and if you're planning to continue using that mobile site for the next, 6 months, 12 months, it behooves you to address this as soon as possible. And like with that other project, the research project that I mentioned, if you'd like a copy of this report, we'd be happy to send you a copy. Just email us at the address below. So just a final item here. If you're wondering, well, what's the real ramifications of having mobile redirect errors, some of these really technical things we've talked about today, the real consequence is kind of profound. Here's an example that we spotted in the wild last summer when we learned that Google was planning to make their smartphone algorithm live in the coming months. We we noticed that, as an example, when you did a search for GM on Google at that point in time from your smartphone, there was a link for Chevrolet division. We also noticed that when you clicked that link, it resulted in a page not found 404 error. That error went unaddressed for some time. In fact, I think it still is an error. But what is also changed is that in September of 2013, when Google did finally announce that the smartphone algorithm was now live, what we noticed is that that page, that link to the Chevrolet division, was no longer in Google's index. At least it wasn't being served up on the same GM query. What that means is that page was no longer getting Google traffic. It didn't earn its spot in the search results. So that's sort of an example of what can happen if we don't address these mobile redirect errors that lead to 404 pages. That's the consequence. Your pages are at risk of completely falling out of the index for certain search queries. Sorry, I'm just forwarding the slides here. So it's worth noting that diagnosing these kind of faulty redirects can be a bit challenging. Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide or the next, but here is an example just to look at Ford. By contrast, we just looked at GM, but even if you do a search for Mustang, or at least at this time, if you did a search for Mustang from your mobile device on Google, and you saw an advertisement on AdWords for the Ford Mustang. But interestingly enough, it resolved as a status 200, meaning it was appearing to be a valid page, but there's actually no content there. So there's a process that you need to go through in order to diagnose these kinds of faulty redirects. And so if you have the technology and the tools to do so, you can start to see that little things, like in this case, the fact that that ad redirected to a page that used capital C cars and capital M Mustang in the address or in the URL path wasn't being, that address wasn't being like normalized and uncapitalized. And so that is what actually was contributing or causing this error page or the faulty redirect. And so there are tools that can help identify that sort of faulty redirect. We provide some that are free, and you could see that entering that one single Ford.com URL for desktop users resolves just fine, but for mobile users, you can see where the culprit lies, that the server wasn't uncapitalizing some of those words, which then led to a poor user experience on the ad side. So anyway, the point there is make sure that you do the work in diagnosing these kinds of faulty redirects and address them before they become issues. All right, so key number 3 or secret number 3 is to tag your mobile content, tag your mobile pages. What does that mean? Well, again, this recommendation really is aimed at brands who have dedicated mobile sites. And so what you need to do, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but what you need to do is make sure that your desktop URLs in the source code have meta tags that point Google or other bots over to the equivalent m-dot version of that page. So Google is very specific on the recommendation and what they're looking to see here. The desktop version should have in its source code a relationship meta tag, the rel equals alternate tag, in fact, that lists the appropriate m-dot alternative version of that desktop page. Conversely, the mobile page for that deep page should also list the rel equals canonical meta tag that points back to the desktop page. That's part of how Google then understands that, okay, these pages are interrelated, and Google then has a better idea about when to serve which version to desktop versus mobile searchers. I'll give you an example here. Nike uses, of course, desktop site as well as an m-dot mobile site, and you can see in the source code that they're using the link rel equals alternate, and then the media tag, and then href equals, and here you've got the m.nike.com equivalent to the Nike homepage. If you then look at the mobile homepage and view source code, you can see that they have the appropriate link, rel equals canonical, href equals www.nike.com/us, etc. That then connects or sort of closes the loop or connects the dots so that Google sees these are both part of the same content theme or page URL. And the benefit to doing this, I should note, in our research, about 95% of brands that use dedicated mobile sites do not use this technique. They do not have the alternate and canonical tags in place. So only about 5% do. For those that do, here's the benefit. When someone searches for, let's say, Nike in this case, from their iOS or Android device, what they see in the listings is the m.nike.com URL. Once you make this change, we've discovered it takes about 24 hours in general before Google's search results get updated with that mobile URL. And we view that as sort of an improved likelihood of converting that searcher into a click, because if I'm on my mobile device and I see that, oh, this is an m.dot page, there's a sort of psychological signal there that says, oh, this is probably going to be, you know, formatted better for my device. Maybe I'm more likely to click that link as opposed to wanting to click the www version and then expect to have to pinch and zoom. So increases the click-through rate from your search results if you can get that meta tag added. Just a few comments about responsive design here. I did mention this at the outset, but it's important to remember that responsive design doesn't equal SEO. Just because Google recommends responsive design doesn't mean you're going to rank better if you use it. In fact, Google has said as much in different public forums that they support all three methods of mobile formatting. And so that's sort of the first myth that I would like to try to dispel, because I hear it mentioned quite frequently, and it's simply not true. Now, but one of the issues, though, from a tagging perspective and from a coding perspective that you really need to take seriously with responsive design, and Michael alluded to it earlier as well, that it's quite possible to have a responsive site that, you know, seems like you can just check the box that, yeah, we've got the mobile-friendly responsive site and it's more accessible, but it's actually not a better user experience because it wasn't designed in a mobile-first fashion. So some of the things to consider are, at least in our research, responsive design pages tend to be about twice as heavy. They tend to weigh about twice as much when compared to an m.dot mobile page. Meaning, you know, as I said earlier, the mobile user has to still download the entire payload, all of the images, scripts, style sheets, just in order to get the mobile formatting for their device. So that's really suboptimal. And so if you're going down the responsive design path, and by the way, for many brands, that makes a ton of sense. I'm not trying to discourage responsive design. I think for many brands, it makes a lot of sense to go responsive. But you do need to consider some of these deeper issues and how you get the page weight down, and how do you get the number of requests required to assemble that page down. You know, it's not uncommon, we've found, to, you know, have a desktop page making hundreds of requests to different files in order to assemble a given page. How do you get that down to like 10 for mobile users? Like you really need to go through that architecture process if you want your responsively designed pages to also comply with Google's other requirements that your pages load in 1 second or less. There are some amazing tools that we highly recommend, including Google's own page speed tools that help identify opportunities for any page that you enter into the tool to improve, like, compression, or to use compression techniques, caching techniques, image optimization techniques, all of which help reduce file size and improve page load times and page speed. So highly recommend using those tools. All right, so secret number 4 is to invest in social. So one of the big changes that I alluded to at the outset of this webinar is how Google has begun integrating over the last year social signals and Google Plus signals into search results, into Google Maps, into YouTube, and all of Google's products. There's been research also over the last year. This is a screenshot from a study done by Searchmetrics in July 2013 that found very, very high correlation rates between the rankings of pages in Google and the number of +1s that they had, the number of Facebook sharing that they had, the number of tweets, the number of pins. That's very interesting because historically, link building was sort of like that big driver. Like the reason that you did link building was because you knew it worked, and building links to a page, and it increased its social validation in Google's eyes. But with the advent of social media and anybody, any non-technical user who's using Facebook or using Twitter or using Pinterest can sort of vote for that piece of content through sharing on that social media property. It appears that Google is starting to consider those social signals more and more in its ranking algorithm. Now, Google doesn't confirm that. It's sort of a, experts sort of look at this data and believe that there's a causal relationship there. It's not just correlation, and I am one of those who believes that. So what do you do about this? Well, there's a number of strategies and tips to take advantage of social from a mobile perspective. First of all, make sure that all of your mobile pages, as well as your desktop pages for that matter, make sure that they've got the sharing buttons and the tools in place to remove the friction, make it easier for mobile users to share that content to Facebook or to +1 it to their Google Plus followers. If you do not have a Google Plus profile as a brand, you should. In fact, you might already and not know it, because in some cases Google almost sort of crawls the yellow pages, so to speak, and creates profiles for brands and for individual stores that you might not even know about. So you should definitely check whether you have Google Plus profiles out there, perhaps without your knowledge, or perhaps created by somebody independently of your own firm. Because those might be places that consumers go to post reviews that you might not be seeing, but might be influencing search results, might be influencing how your brand is represented in Google Maps, etc. So invest in social, make sure that you've got the right profile, the right presence, you're enabling sharing, you're removing friction from the system when it comes to sharing your content, and start to take advantage of mobile sharing in a very powerful way. Now, this does introduce sort of a dilemma that we've spent quite a bit of time thinking about and working on, and that is, I'm sure that many of you have had the experience of clicking on emails or reading an email from, let's say, your mobile device, and clicking on one of those LinkedIn links or Facebook links or Twitter links from your device, and you are greeted with a login page on LinkedIn or the login page to Facebook. And one of the issue here is, and really the desire for a great mobile experience, is that we want to get the user directly into the app if they've got the app on their device. So there's a technical challenge with doing that. A mobile page, like in this case, Eastbay, has of course, a presence on Facebook, and the address is a web URL, m.facebook.com/Eastbay. There's nothing new about that. But what's new is that you can actually access that same exact page inside of the Facebook app if the app's on your phone, using the address fb://profile/ and then this big ID number. The difficulty is, how do you, on the one hand, serve up that experience, that URL, that app URL, to someone who's got the app, while at the same time not creating an error for somebody who doesn't have the app on their device. And so this is where the whole idea of deep linking comes into play. This is sort of a new, very hot space known as deep linking or app linking. And the idea is to target mobile users who have apps on their devices with URLs that access that page inside of that app to provide a better user experience, increase engagement, increase mobile commerce, etc. And so there are a number of solutions in the market around deep linking. We happen to have one called URL Genius. And just a quick screenshot of how that kind of looks, where you can create a deep link for any social media profile, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Google+, even LinkedIn, and configure the link so that users of iOS devices or specific Android devices get served the URL scheme or the app URL. When they've got the app on their device, that opens the app. And when they don't have the app on their device, they just get the normal web experience. So if you do deep linking right, it's sort of like progressive enhancement. It upgrades the user experience for app users while not degrading the user experience for non-app users. And so the upshot is, the benefit is, instead of, let's say on your mobile site, if I'm East Bay, instead of on my mobile site having my social icons linking mobile users into login pages, similarly with the email campaigns that I send out to my huge list and have social icons listed in my email, instead of routing those app users to login pages, instead we can link those users directly into the app where they most likely are already logged in. And so whether it's the Facebook app or the Google+ app or the Twitter app, we can directly get them in and increase our chance of converting that email subscriber or that website visitor into a new follower or a new friend or a new like. The last tip, the last secret that we're going to spend time looking at today is promoting your apps intelligently. So apps are part of the mobile ecosystem. When we see stats like this from Walmart stating that customers who have the app tend to be very loyal customers who buy more, visit the store more, have higher order values, that says there's a direct economic benefit to getting more customers into your app. So there's a few ways that you can accomplish that. One way that has been used in the past, and Google actually has an opinion on this, is some brands would use interstitials so that when you hit their, let's say, their home page, they would serve up an interstitial that promotes the app, tries to get you into the app automatically, or get you to download the app automatically. Google actually recommends avoiding that tactic. Google does recommend that you use a meta tag approach where, in fact, iOS browsers like Safari supports something called smart banners, which allows you to promote your iOS app to iOS users who are using the Safari browser and are on your site. You can then promote the fact that that app is available, and if you have it installed on your device, then that smart banner can also be used to open the app. Although there is some limitation with that because it's difficult to get you into, let's say, a specific page inside of the app. But this is a technique that we have found with brands can make a huge difference in terms of downloading and promoting your app for free. In fact, we've seen increases of download ratios that have exceeded 25% simply by promoting the app using smart banners to or rather by integrating smart banners into your mobile site or even onto your desktop site, so that when any iOS user accesses either of those pages, they have this promotion that's targeted to them and relevant to them, that they can actually download the app, start using the app, and it costs you nothing in terms of that that acquisition of that additional download. So definitely want to use that technique. And there's also a new technique that Google has provided support for in the last few months that's similar to the deep linking concept that I mentioned earlier. You can actually, if you've got an Android app, you can actually enable your search listings that show up inside of Android search results to have an open in-app button next to the search results. It's pretty cool. And so Google has a lot of documentation on how to enable that, but quite simply, it works, in fact, very similarly to the smart banners concept I just mentioned, where assuming that your app has the kind of deep link support that it requires, you can add a few meta tags to each individual page of your website, and from that point forward, Google then is able to then sort of crawl your app and knows when to serve up the URL scheme that accesses those app pages to Google searchers. That does raise sort of an important point, that if you've got an app for iOS or Android, you need to make sure that you enable deep linking support inside of the app. That is a very technical process, but you can't even participate in this deep linking, in these deep linking opportunities unless you enable that support inside of your app by defining a URL scheme protocol that your app will respond to. And we would recommend mapping out the URL structure so that it correlates to your either your desktop or your mobile web URL structure, so that it's easy to maintain, easy to manage. But if you can enable that, then you can start to take advantage of some pretty cool things. And in this final example I'll show you is eBay, I think, is doing a phenomenal job of mobile commerce deep linking, where you do a search for a Mac power cord from iOS, you get the mobile web page, but at the top of this, you've got a banner that's saying you can download the app if you don't have it, or you can open that same page inside of the app. And when you click that link, now you're inside of the eBay app on that same exact Mac power cord auction page, which if I've got the app, I'm probably already signed in and can more easily make that purchase. So deep linking is a very powerful part of the mobile ecosystem. Google has made some significant investments in providing support for deep linking. Facebook as well, over the last few weeks, has announced their app linking initiative, which is an open source sort of set of recommendations on how you can take advantage of deep linking if you have lots of developer resources to sort of throw at this problem. But deep linking is absolutely part of the mobile SEO future and can enable you to really optimize that mobile user experience and your mobile search results and your mobile commerce or other engagement results. So with that, I think we're approaching the top of the hour here. Just a little bit of information in this deck about the kinds of services that Pure Oxygen provides. And with that, I'll sort of turn it over to Michael for any final questions, and certainly thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely fantastic. I'm just enthralled, and I do have a ton of questions. I know we're running a little over, but I want to, for those that are online, you can go ahead and then drop off, and you can come back and listen to the recording to get answers to some of these questions. So first and foremost, the whole presentation was about Google. So is there anything else in terms of mobile search beyond the realms of Google?
That's an excellent question. It's a fair question. So the reason that we focused on Google is because if you look at the market share data, Google commands about 95% of mobile search market share. So if you don't nail the Google opportunity, you're kind of missing out on the whole boat. And moreover, Google has been the most aggressive in terms of announcing these types of initiatives, recommendations, requirements. So we think that the right approach is to focus on Google's requirements first, and then our sense is that Bing will, or other international engines will probably follow suit, as has happened. There's a lot of sort of evidence that same sequence has happened in other areas unrelated to mobile, but just letting Google sort of set the standard and following on. So yeah, it's a great point. Not sure how the market share data will change, or if there's any evidence that will change significantly in the near future. So yeah, we definitely think you want to nail the Google part of the equation first.
Okay. And then what about in terms of, you talked about the explanation of keywords in the beginning, and I think people might have lost that a little bit. So is the keyword dead, and am I not doing keywords, or is it just implemented in a different way?
Excellent question. So the keyword is not dead, but it is changing, in that Google is now wanting you to focus more on keyword themes, more on the general theme of the pages, as opposed to historically, your rankings were rewarded if you simply had lots of, if you mentioned that same keyword a few times in the page and had links pointing at that site using those same words in the anchor text of those links. And so Google's trying to sort of de-emphasize the keyword. They're definitely making it harder for you to measure the effects of your rankings by encrypting and in fact removing the search engine referrer strings and providing the not or doing the not provided. Basically your analytics say not provided instead of having a keyword there now. So Google really is on a couple of fronts de-emphasizing the use of keywords. Doesn't mean that they no longer work, but I think you're starting to witness a slow transition into sort of broader. Google is becoming able to understand just broader conceptual themes of a page, and they, just focusing on individual keywords and stuffing keywords into your page is not an effective future-proof strategy anymore.
Right, and so keywords are going beyond just like the linking of metadata in the header into just a total semantic reading of the page.
Exactly.
So Google is actually starting to read your page, be able to interpret your page, and so it's not just words that you use, but actually the string of those words, and as they come together, are you telling a full story?
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
yeah,
perfect.
That's right. It takes content creation to a new level.
Fantastic. And you brought up a lot of technical stuff. I mean, to what extent does the average marketer who's maybe a more creatively aligned or creatively focused, how do they actually implement this? Or like a small to medium-sized business who doesn't necessarily have the technical chops to implement this. How does one go about, getting started?
Well, I think that is an excellent question in terms of sort of the practical next steps. So in some respects, I think different platforms that, let's say, a small and medium-sized business might be using, I think you're starting to see them integrate some of these concepts into their offering. But for larger enterprises in particular, I would say you should have an audit conducted of each of these technical areas that can summarize the action, summarize the issues, and help prioritize them. Not all of these issues are equally weighted. Everybody's got limited resources. So how do you go about spending those limited resources in the most productive, efficient way to execute these tactics and make sure you comply with Google's requirements, especially ahead of any important like seasonal trend like holiday season, for instance. So I think that's the first step. Regardless of business size, you really need to sort of have an expert conduct an audit, do an analysis of these issues, present them to you, your team, your marketing team, your IT team, your copywriting team, and sort of collectively prioritize the effort that's got to go into that and understand the business upside as well. So that's really sort of the most practical way of moving forward. And as I said, there are some free tools out there as well. We've invested quite a lot in offering some free tools that anyone can use to start to diagnose some of these issues and educate themselves, educate their team. So go to the Pure Oxygen Labs website and dig into some of our mobile redirect tools or mobile error checking tools. And you can start to get a sense of the order of magnitude that some of these issues might mean to your business.
And would you have a kind of an audit checklist that you might be able to share with the audience, or how does that work? Because there's a lot of these tools out there, but even then it gets a little complicated. Which tool is the right tool, and what is it telling me? And is there a 5-point checklist, much like when I'm getting my car checked, that I can go through? And that at least lets me diagnose the problem. Then I can then go to a service like yours to say, can you fix it for me?
Right. Well, I don't know if there are any of those sort of out there on a free basis. That's something that I know, obviously, consultants, and we do provide those kinds of services as well, sort of provide that checklist at this point in time that can prioritize and identify those items.
Okay, so the answer there is come to you and you can help.
Yes. Or any other reputable, search expert, mobile search expert could provide a similar analysis and prioritization, I suspect.
Fantastic. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, and I'm sure a lot of people have a lot more questions. And so, at any point in time, they can reach you at brian@pureoxygenlabs.com. Correct?
That's right. Or follow me on Twitter at Brian Klais. Would love to hear from some of you.
Perfect. And just kind of wrap up for everybody, just so everyone knows, we have a number of other events coming up. Next week in New York, we have a workshop and dinner we're hosting with Waterfall on nurturing customer relationships in and with mobile, so and specifically mobile messaging. So I hope you can attend that event. And we're also going to be holding that same workshop in Chicago on the 17th. So I hope you can either come to yourselves, or if you have colleagues that would be interested in attending, please feel free to forward on these activities. and you can register today. Likewise, on June 18th with Standby, we'll be hosting an executive wine tasting and networking event with Master Sommelier Ron Edwards. He's one of 214 people in the world with that title, and he's going to be talking about how the interactivities of wine are very similar to the interactivities that you're having with your customer relationships. So it's an invite-only event, and if you're interested in joining us for that, please reach out to us. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Then finally, next week, the Rising Stars Awards event is happening on Tuesday, June 3rd in New York. And Marketing Edge is a fantastic organization that's dedicated to helping college students, juniors and seniors, embrace a career in marketing, and specifically providing services to the industry to help educate, develop, grow, and employ our future marketers. So if you are so inclined and happen to be in New York next week, we encourage you to attend this gala. And if you're unable to attend the gala, we invite you to get involved. And one way to get involved is Give to Get. So we're actually having a fundraiser that we're running right now. And if you're so inclined and part of the marketing community and see the value of closing that gap that exists within either working professionals, practitioners roles, and most importantly, making sure that the marketers that are coming into the field right out of school are actually prepared, please think about contributing to this great organization and helping us close that gap when it comes to marketing talent in the industry. And with that, finally, on that note of closing the gap in marketing talent, just want to let you know that mCordis will be launching our first qualified mobile marketing training program in July in London with the IDM. And we are going to be, and if those that take this class will be getting a professional qualification, what's referred to as an award through the IDM, and then later this year we'll be offering a certification program in mobile marketing as well. So if you want to learn any more about these programs, please let us know. And with that, thank you, and thank you, Brian. Again, fantastic event. I really appreciated your sharing your insights with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you, everyone, for your time.
All right, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.